А вторым участником сегодняшнего
Second participant of today's session, special opinion, will be a person you are well familiar with after these 2 days, Maxim Kantor. Good afternoon. I want to say very simple things, and I hope they will be adequately heard. Yesterday, I had to look through the newspapers in the evening, and I learned with surprise that I was against political correctness. Before that, I heard I was against impressionism and many other things. I'm going to talk about other things. I was going to think about the change of paradigm of modernity. What modern language is and what is perceived to be the modern language. And that change of paradigm, the fact that it is time to reconsider the modernity and to the language that is adequate to describe the modernity is clear. It's as clear as we want to change the president. It would be strange to demand a new president and to think that the conception of modern art will remain the same. No, that is wrong. Everything ages, and the understanding of modernity ages very fast. This is just the same rotation as the rotation of presidents. You know, there's a Russian law that the bald president is replaced by a hairy one, and vice versa. So you have to keep and based on the same law, we must at least have the courage to look at modernity with open eyes, just like we looked at Brezhnev times. There were times of social realism, of total aesthetics, made us look at it with open eyes and demand freedom and market, and that was normal. But just in the same fashion, the young generation of critics should have courage to see the modernity as institutionals are bog, because it is nothing else. And you must fix the mess with terms. We still use words like avant-garde, radicalism, and instinctively we mean something positive. When we say radical, it means courageous, heroic. But of course, a radical person is nothing like that. And in that sense, the word radical has lost its meaning. If you look at the word avant-garde, which used to mean the minority of the marginalized, a very small detachment of people, lonely people, of marginals, now you can see that this word corresponds to the opinion of the majority. It's the opinion of the crowd. It's a mass taste. The internet is both radical and avant-garde, and it's the majority, the tastes of curators and the museums, and so on. And it's not an opinion of a minority group. Avant-garde was a declaration of the poor. Nowadays, avant-garde is related to the market and to the rich. Avant-garde was a desire for a real action. Now it's mostly a desire for decoration. Avant-garde wanted social reform. Now, avant-garde has really become the pillar of capitalism. When we say avant-garde, we mean something reverse to what it used to mean. And let's be free of those illusions. That common concept of avant-garde as something good and something courageous has lost every sense. The word avant-garde and radicalism have become senseless. Long ago, when those totalitarian regimes existed in Eastern Europe, the challenge was to have irony, to have a special sarcastic discourse which we called postmodernism. Was clear. You had to destroy that ideology, and it was successfully destroyed. The paradox of Moscow conceptualism is that not a single concept was created. Again, it's a play of words, just like with the word radical. Conceptualism actually destroyed concepts. It was Putin and the oil people who created the concept. Throughout the 20 years, when the system of modernity was at work, the concepts were created, but those are absolutely different concepts, not the ones that the artistic audiences discussed. It was the concept of managing the society, building pipelines, forging the elections, and so on. So, an art who was trying to invent a concept reminded me a husband from a joke who says, "I'm the boss in the family. If you ask whether there's life on Mars, I will give answer. But if you ask how much money we will spend, such minor decisions are taken by my wife." The same thing happened with art. Art succeeded everything that is called life to state, and the state was glad to take it over and conceded. And what we have here is the result of the lack of action by the art of the recent 20 years. A simple question arises. Why do we need art? What the hell? Why do we need art if it doesn't tell us anything? Nevertheless, art is needed, and it provides an impetus to freedom. And that impetus to freedom is why it exists in the society. That impetus to freedom must be present. A person must be told that you are not a slave of circumstances, elections, war, inflation, or other things. Here, during this short time, you are free. You can express yourself. There is a phenomenon of self-expression that doesn't lead to anything. It yields any responsibility for producing anything. It's the self-expression that relies on the state to do something. And there's a very significant thing that happened. The loss of an integral notion of man. Something that existed during the Renaissance or in the 19th century Germany about what Pierre de Chardin was writing. The person has been dissembled into different disciplines, and that turned out to be very convenient, in particular for the new edition of democracy, which doesn't look like democracy at all at times. All those disciplines cannot come to an agreement, just like European leaders cannot come to an agreement at a summit. In a situation of crisis, they fail to find a common language. How can a historian, a writer, an artist come to an agreement? They don't have a common humanistic language that was being developed during the Renaissance. It doesn't exist, and it's not needed. It's just like when you come to a doctor with a sore nose and ask whether he can cure your leg, he will send you to another doctor. So there's no general practitioner that could cure literature, history, and other branches. And that general practitioner is absent for a good reason, because the society exchanges the mutual guarantees of authenticities. So they exchange the stocks of a mine which doesn't have oil. The politicians operate with ratings. Businessmen operate with forged stocks. Entrepreneurs operate with stolen money. And that's because writers operate with words that don't mean anything. There is no discipline. There's no social role. As soon as the person stops acting in a society, when a person cannot overcome the corporate moral for the sake of common human moral, and people cannot do that, and that exchange of forged ideas and forged words is what is happening, and the art played a role in that, because the art could not formulate and has lost the common human purpose that we expected it to clearly announce. And the silence, by definition, is filled by the state will, and in that sense, the art of the latest years plays a role of a shaman that really uses some enchantments trying to cure the world. And those enchantments distract people from what is happening. The patient will not recover, but at least will be a little bit enjoying it. And that shamanism, which is contemporary art, is very indicative for this status of Western culture. As different from Andrei Konchalovsky, I don't believe that's the decline of the West. It's one of the episodes in the history of the West. The West is a very complex organism, which is doomed to be sick. That's why it is healthy. It's a very complex organism that sometimes nearly dies, then it revives, like a phoenix. All complex organisms would be sick from time to time. It's the microbes that don't have false pregnancy. And while complex organisms do have diseases, and all that shamanism and iconoclastic mood is one of the diseases of the West. The fact that the West paganized in the 20th century, that the Christian experience has been destroyed, that the humanistic tradition is connected with totalitarian mind and needs to be destroyed, and the sign as such did not stand the time and became a toy in the hands of the state, is what happened. There is no image of the time. The humanistic art has been punctured and shrunk. That's the trouble. But because of the vital forces of the West, and because of the traditions, and there is historical tradition that is not related to Lipschitz or Marxism, it's related to Plato. Because of that tradition, the West will show again how great it is. But what is happening now is very much needed to the new generation of critics that are, it's very necessary to look at today, to see the today as the routine, as the bug that we saw in the Soviet Union of the Brezhnev time. You have to overcome them. You have to talk again, and not to talk a lingo, but to talk a common human language. Not your internal jargon, but an interdisciplinary language, destroying the boundaries between different disciplines so that a historian and a philosopher understands you. Thank you. Thank you, Maxim. Do you have any objections? Nikotanin, the chief curator of the French Museum.
Juste, pardonnez-moi, je parle.
There is translation. What's the problem? I wanted to expand on what you said and ask, shouldn't we come back even further? Not to see the situation in Russia since the end of the Soviet epoch only. Not to start with Putin and the democratic regimes. When Hölderlin wrote in the end of the 18th century, why don't the poets during this time of despair state that the Western civilization has lost its beacons and the art has a function of preserving what can be preserved during this time of despair? This is what Baudelaire did in his own fashion. He asked who was the poet of this epoch through all that Paris life, through prostitution, through the lifestyles. The issue is maybe deeper than the 20 years of the past. That wasn't a question. Thank you for your addition. That was an expansion, and I subscribe to that. The art is what, in principle, is intended to preserve the human genome and the genome of humanism. And actually, that is what the great art always does. It preserves an image that is translated through any epoch, even the darkest one. The fact that we're discussing, willing or nilling, we're discussing those 20 years. Of course, I mean a broader perspective. And of course, you cannot study history by those 20 years. I'm always worried when a lover of art measures his likes and dislikes by dozens of years. The art has existed for a long time. You can't love an ear or a heel or an eye in a person. And certainly, those 20 years was not the healthiest period. It was an empty time with empty people, small people. But probably we needed that. For some reason, that period was necessary, probably for the young generations to see that, so that we could compare with the great dictators and the great artists and small entrepreneurs and small painters. Probably we needed that time to see the scale. We have another question from the audience. Please pass the mic. It's not a comment. It's not a question, it's a comment. If we're talking about what's happening on the political stage, or what should we do to sell this or that, and how advertisement is sold, that is so. But speaking of art in general, I think everyone will agree that it exists somewhere, honestly, and without any campaigns. Can you hear me? And because if we talk about art, separate personalities are coming to the forefront. It unites the eye, the heel, and the ear. At some moment, the underground turned into establishment. Art is in the underground now. It will reveal itself. What is exhibited, this dictatorship of curators, of certifications, there will be fight, as usual.
There won't be even a fight. You should address that as a product that will die out. We haven't been fighting that directly with Brezhnev and with social realism. Even I was painting pictures, I admit, at the same time, but the fight was not in those things. As well as you shouldn't fight against the things that the contemporary is trying to pronounce. It will dry out and fall on by itself. If previously the painters have to bow in front of secretaries of regional commissionaries, today they bow to drug traders and they go to the yachts of rich people and they lick the asses of the rich men. It's the same. It's the same thing, and of course it's versus the art, and the art is becoming worse. Each art has its own time. We have Brezhnev's art and so on and so forth, and even if we want to escape this definition, we still belong to this Brezhnev's art. Even Solzhenitsyn, even Zinoviev, and even me. Today it's the Putin's art, the Putin's era art. It's the thieves' art, but somebody is closer to those thieves, others are farther away. Somebody likes to work with them, others don't. It depends on whether you like free goodies or you don't like them. Our third question here, and this is not a question, actually, it's a comment. Yes, please, the floor is yours. You've got a problem with your mic. Can you hear me now? Yes. Good. My name is Yana Rebrova. I'm an innovator. It's my and I'm an applied mathematician as my background, and I like applying my knowledge in different areas, including the arts. I'm doing that to find solutions to existing problems. And I've got a question to Maxim. First and foremost, I'd like to thank you for providing us with a great analysis and presenting your thesis, and that you listed out those problems we currently have, that the art currently faces. Apart from drafting the list of problems, you've also showed us the current state of art. First, you described this 20 years of art's laziness. Then you said that there is no common language, that the art is silent. And you've also given a motto, or basically a food for our further thoughts. It's a call for action. You asked us to see that it's a swamp. No, it's not like that. I was talking about different things. It's my own personal opinion. Let me finish first, and then I'll give you the floor. And apart from that, yes, it's not 100% a copy of your words. It's like a working draft of my presentation. So yes, it's what I managed to construct from your presentation. And also you've given some light to the current state of the global art and the existing challenges and problems. And you've given us with some solutions, how those problems can be resolved. You said that we need to speak an interdisciplinary language, because this infrastructure is pretty vast, and we have artists, we have art critics, experts, professionals, and universities. Yana, sorry, I have to address Maxim. Maxim, can you answer Yana during the coffee break? Yes, yes. I just want to make a brief comment right now while I'm giving some time. It's really brief. Yana, I've got your message. I've heard you. Due to my natural inability to express myself clearly and also some elderly sclerosis, you didn't hear me well. I was definitely describing the silence of the art, the thieves' environment, and so on and so on. But did I really mean the things that you described? No, I meant absolutely different things. I meant that the art has to come back to humanistic Christian paradigm, which is shared by everyone, which is global. And in the sense of this global, and this global paradigm is interdisciplinary. The art can also become interdisciplinary if it utilizes the Christian paradigm. Well, my question is as follows. You expressed it in very global terms. You said that we are shifting, that we're in the process of alternating paradigms, but what an artist can do, must do, an art critic, what they must do, this small person, what they have to do, what their next action will be. I'm answering your question. This artist, this young critic, this young person have or must get to know that apart from his small closed world, closed circle, there is a global knowledge, that there's a whole world of knowledge, libraries and so on and so forth. He or she shall not listen to three competent people only, but try to refer and resort to the whole libraries of knowledge. And you also have to know that this pseudo-language, which has been forced upon you as a global one, is just a local language. It has its birth date and it has its death dates. It lives only throughout a certain period of time. I didn't say that I don't like Impressionism. I just say that it's not possible to use the language of Impressionism in Franco-Prussian war. That's the limits that are posed by our language. And an art critic, the small person, needs to know that each and every language has its own limits. And this symbolical or ironical language of concepts, this small language of gestures, of flags that you use in the Navy, it only lives. It's only short-lived. It only lives for a short-term period of like a butterfly. All those... no one ever canceled some natural things like a blood flow in your body, like the nature around you. They still exist. And if you were told that they don't exist, they lied to you. The categorical thinking also never went away. It was always there. One more question. You told us about the artists, but what teachers and universities shall do? Go to the libraries. Go to the libraries right now. Yana, you've achieved something that no one was able to do. You managed to reserve yourself some personal time with Maxim Kantor after this presentation. Also, some time ago you told us that in our universities a very good classical education is provided, but no cool art critics are being graduated, not cool art critics are being taught. Yana, I heard you. I heard you. I just need to put an end to that. On 12th of May, I'm opening a big conference in Oxford, which is called The Volcano, about the shift of paradigm of modernity. Eric Hobsbawm, Tommy Levy, Umberto Eco, Timothy Radcliffe, the head of Dominicans, they all take part in this conference and will try to tackle the same issue with even more intensity. Do come to visit us. Thank you. Thank you. And we're coming back to this audience in 15 minutes. In 15 minutes to continue to discuss the connections between Arctic and the